Roll call on Legislative Day 33, Monday, February 27th, 2023. Anderson? Baldwin? Barlow? Beitman? Boner? Bouchard? Brennan? Case? Cooper? Dockstetter? Ellis? French? Furphy? Guru? Hicks? Hutchings? Ide? Jones? Kinski? Kolb? Landon? Larson? McEwen? Nethercott? Pappas? Rothfuss? Salazar? Schuler? Scott? Steinmetz? President Driscoll? 31 present.
Prayer by Rabbi Moshe Halfon. Thank you. Appreciate it. Senator Boner.
No, I'm just standing. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to get corrected on the name after I get it wrong. Rabbi?
I'll say it once. And I had the opportunity last week. I was with the House today. I'm with you this week. So I wish you didn't have to stand because I'm just going to say a word of introduction. Yes, Moshe Halfon. And my mother used to say Helfen. You know, it sounds like hello. You know, and just a word or two. You know that I'm very honored to do this. I moved here from California in January of 22, so I'm used to the snow. I lived in Boston and Philadelphia and New York. As you know, the Jews came to Wyoming with the Union Pacific Railroad back in the 1860s. Down the street at Pioneer, I think 26 is a sign of where the first synagogue was built in 1919. This building we have now down the street was 1949. So we really, I guess the Jewish community, you know, was here when the state was becoming a state, and kind of makes sense with the calling Wyoming the equality state. Rather than leading a prayer each time, sometimes tomorrow, for example, I will do some teaching from different books like the Mishnah, Hasidic saying, something to inspire you rather than a prayer. But today, something that will sound more familiar as a prayer. We cannot merely pray to God to end war, for the world was made in such a way that we must find our own path of peace within ourselves and with our neighbors. We cannot merely pray to God to root out prejudice, for we already have eyes with which to see the good in all people if we would only use them rightly. We cannot merely pray to God to end starvation, for we already have the resources with which to feed the entire world if we would only use them wisely. We cannot merely pray to God to end despair, for we already have the power to clear away slums and to give hope if we would only use our power justly. This is from the 80s, so slums maybe, to do anything of that nature. We cannot merely pray to God to end disease, for we already have great minds with which to search out cures and healings if we would only use them constructively. Therefore, we pray instead for strength, determination, and willpower to do instead of merely to pray, to become instead of merely to wish, that our world may be safe and that our lives may be blessed. That's by Rabbi Jack Reamer. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Rabbi. Rabbi is from Mount Sinai Synagogue here in Cheyenne. Thank you. Appreciate having you here and welcome to Wyoming.
I'll be back, you know, up there.
So, Mary Throne, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading correction, approval of the journal.
Mr. President, your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of February 24, 2023 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Senator Larson, Chairman.
You've heard the report. Are there any objections? Being none, the report is adopted. Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Privilege of the floor, real quick.
Granted.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're taking some orders for Wyoming Senate belt buckles. This is something that a few of us have. I think, well, Senator Driscoll and I are working on getting a list together of folks who want to do a joint order. It's $175 for a silver buckle, $400 for a sterling buckle. So if you're interested, contact either the president or myself. They look sharp. I know I wear mine all the time. And so if you're interested, just I'll let you know. That's something we're going to try and get done before the session's over.
Thank you, Senator Boney. Yeah, preferably by end of day today, because I'd like to get that off. Senator Cooper.
Privilege of the floor, Mr. President.
Granted.
Thank you, Mr. President. I got a couple things I want to talk to you about this morning. First of all and foremost, on the left over here, if they could stand, this is the government class from Tinsley, Wyoming, led by their teacher, Miss Emma Reed. That young man on the right with the haircut just like mine is my grandson Walker. So we'd like to welcome him to the Senate, first of all, this morning.
Welcome.
Secondly, Mr. President, I had the privilege of attending the UW Cowgirls basketball game on Saturday night. What a game. I think Senator Schuler was there. You should have been there. It was truly amazing. Our Cowgirls are locked up second place going into the tournament in Vegas. And I'd like to wish my hero, Tommy Olson, and her helper, Allison Furtick from Wyoming, and Quinn Weideman, and the rest of their crew, the best of luck at Las Vegas.
Let's hear it for the Cowgirls. Senator Scott.
Mr. President, may I have the privilege of floor briefing?
Granted.
Mr. President, on the topic of proposals for joint interim studies, joint interim topics, I went and asked Matt Albright on the policy, and the Friday deadline was for external proposals from somebody, lobbyists, and those from outside the legislature. And he was very clear that individual legislators could propose topics anytime, including especially at the joint committee meetings to settle on joint interim. So just wanted to make that clear, Mr. President, because there was some misunderstanding on that.
Thank you. No doctor or nurse today, so we're back to the rotating deal with Senator Baldwin. You're the doctor today. So today in Wyoming history, and this is kind of interesting and significant. 1915, Governor Kendrick approves a Workers' Compensation Act establishing state-maintained workers' compensation fund. While heavily litigated and occasionally amended and often castigated, the basic structure, groundbreaking 1915 Act remains today. Somewhat unique in the United States, the Wyoming Act created a wholly state-administered workers' compensation system in which workmen surrendered their rights to bring certain workplace civil actions. Employers gave up their common law defenses so that certain suits that had traditionally been available for personal injury in the workplace were eliminated in favor of a system of insurance. Pretty groundbreaking. The state's done some pretty interesting things. I had no clue it went back to 15. Quote for the day: "The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams." Eleanor Roosevelt. Today's last day for Committee of the Whole in the Second House. Today, we're joined with pretty special friends. Members of the Senate, we welcome representatives of the Wyoming Breast Cancer Initiative who will provide an update in their efforts to raise awareness and increase prevention of breast cancer in Wyoming. Over the past 7 years, the Wyoming Breast Cancer Initiative has granted over $845,000 into 58 programs across all 23 Wyoming counties. Please help me welcome their advisory team, Kelly Morgan and Mary Throne. Welcome, ladies. Mary, you have the stand.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've never spoken at this mic before, I don't believe. So, good morning, Mr. President, senators. Thank you so much for hosting us and for wearing pink today in support of breast cancer awareness. As Mr. President said, I'm Mary Throne. I'm here today as the president of the board for the Wyoming Breast Cancer Initiative and a breast cancer survivor. To take a deep breath for this part. 10 years ago, I was down the hall as a member of the Wyoming House. I swore I got on my crying out before I got here. Mr. President was in his first term, believe it or not, as was the minority floor leader. The tall senator from Natrona County was not in his first term. Nearly every day of the 2013 session, I left the Capitol for an hour or so to receive radiation treatment a few blocks away at CRMC. I was only able to both serve and endure the treatment because of the support not only of my family, my immediate family, but my legislative family. All of the members of the 62nd, our friends in the lobby, LSO, session staff, and even the chief executive made it possible for me to do my job each and every day. In fact, one of the first calls of support I received after my diagnosis was up from our dear friend, Senator Coe. And so, why do I share this story with you again? Because my story is not unique among those of us who serve on the WBCI board, or among many of you here who know personally that cancer patients, no matter the flavor of cancer, cannot do it alone. Our board is composed of survivors and friends and family of survivors and those who have lost their battle with breast cancer. And I'd like all of the board members and any survivors to please stand. We have some in, I don't remember which gallery this is. and if you could help me welcome them.
Here, here.
And also with me today is Kelly Morgan. Since we last reported to you, we've grown as an organization. We're very excited about that. And Kelly is our recently minted executive director. And so that means you will see more of her and less of me in the future. But thank you, Kelly. Welcome, Kelly. So all of us are committed to the mission of the WBCI because we know it takes a community to support patients and their families. And one of our special board members is our honorary board member, emeritus, who was also on our founding board, Bobby Barrasso. We formed in 2016 as a Wyoming nonprofit with the mission to raise awareness and fund breast cancer programs with an emphasis on increasing breast health education, financially assisting breast cancer patients, facilitating patient navigation, and promoting survivor services throughout the state of Wyoming. And I want to thank all of you for the passage of House Bill 199, which will help us increase awareness across the state of Wyoming. In Wyoming, nearly every day, somebody is diagnosed with breast cancer. In only 7 years of existence, we have donated over $800,000 in grants across the state of Wyoming, in all 23 counties. Our mission is statewide. We have funded thousands of breast cancer treatments. Sorry, my statistics disappeared on my phone. We partner with, sorry, there it is, with the Department of Health to make sure that everyone in Wyoming who needs a mammogram can receive a mammogram. Early detection is key. We also fund gas cards. Not everybody could walk to treatment the way I could when I was in Cheyenne. Certainly in our rural areas, which is nearly all of the state, it is difficult for people to get to treatment. We want to support them in any way we can. We also encourage navigation services. It's very difficult when you receive a cancer diagnosis to know what's next, what's coming, and I think navigation is one of our really important missions. Finally, we continue to have our pink ribbon runs, but notice I said runs, plural. The legislature has a history of participating in those runs, and I hope you'll consider doing so again, but now we have 3 of them. We have one in, I'm gonna have to look to Kelly, August 5th, because since I can't get my notes up on my phone, August 5th in Cheyenne. Oh, whoops, sorry. August 5th is Casper, middle of the state, easy to get to. August 12th is Cheyenne, the traditional date for our Pink Ribbon Run here. And then a really fun run that I was able to participate in last year. Well, I didn't run, I walked. Was in Riverton, and that will be on August 19th. So thank you so much for your time today. I know you have a busy day today. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you so much for all of your support.
Many thanks again, Mary. Always fun to have one of our old esteemed House members. Senator Ellis,
Thank you, Mr. President. May I have privilege of the floor?
you may.
Just to add on to our speaker's comments, for years, Wyoming had a national organization that organized breast cancer awareness events. And because of our size, the size of our population, they wanted actually to combine us with another state, and a lot of those funds would have been diverted elsewhere. And so rather than let these events go, it was really dedicated people living in Wyoming who said, let's form something that's uniquely Wyoming, where dollars will stay in Wyoming, and that is this group. And so I just really want to emphasize, this is no small achievement that these individuals, the people sitting on the boards, the race organizers have undertaken. I've been involved with the race, I think, for 20 plus years now. It's something I'm really proud of, and so I just really want you to know how much your work means to me, and we'll continue to support the race and our breast cancer people who are suffering with that and people who are on the back end of it and recovering. So thank you for everything that you do.
Kudos. Thank you for the explanation after. Messages from the House.
From the House of Representatives, February 24, 2023. Message number 449. Mr. President, House appointed House conferees to meet with a like committee number 2 from the Senate on amendments to House Bill 14. House conferees are Representative Olson, Chairman, Representative Nemec, and Representative Washut. Message number 447. Concurrence requested. Mr. President, the following Senate files passed on third reading in an amended form by the votes indicated, and the House respectfully asks the Senate to concur by adopting amendments. Senate File 169, State Shooting Complex Task Force, ayes 51, noes 11. Message number 445, Senate File 116, Protection of Lawful Commerce in Firearms, ayes 62. Message number 444, Senate File 100, Designation of Spouses, Revocation upon Divorce or Annulment, ayes 50, noes 12. Message number 441, Senate File 154, Energy Authority Project Financing Refineries, ayes 60, noes 2. Message number 443, Senate File 79, Plan of Safe Care Newborns, ayes 47, noes 15. Message number 443, Senate File 79, Plan of Safe Care Newborns, ayes 47, noes 15. Message number 444, Senate File 100, ayes 50, noes 12. Message number 423 on February 23, Senate File 97, Education Trust Fund Transfer, ayes 56, noes 2, excused 4. Message number 447, February 24, 2023, ayes 51, noes 11 on Senate File 169, State Shooting Complex Task Force. Message number 445, Senate File 116, Protection of Lawful Commerce in Firearms, ayes 62, noes 0. Signed sincerely, Katie Talbot, House Chief Clerk.
Thank you, Randy. Concurrences. Senator Baldwin, if you're ready on message number 443, requesting concurrence on Senate File 79,
I am, Mr.
I will
President.
have that read in.
Message number 443, referencing Senate File 79, Plan of Safe Care Newborns.
Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move message number 443, concurrence request, originally Senate File number 79, Plan of Safe Care for Newborns, and ask for your favorable consideration and your aye vote. What the other chamber did, fellow senators, is they just made a couple of changes, and I believe they're for the better. One was to put a one-year moratorium on it. The other was just some language identification to just put it under a microscope a little bit closer so it's better identified. Both are good changes. It's a good bill. It passed unanimously out of here, and I suggest that we pass it again out of here and move it on to the governor's desk. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Question being called. Motion is the Senate do concur on message 443 on Senate File 79 and vote aye. The chief clerk will call the roll.
Concurrence. Vote, Senate File 79. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin?
Aye.
Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Doggstetter? Aye. Ellis?
Aye.
Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? Aye. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate Files 79, concurrence, 31 aye.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 79. Senator Barlow, if you're ready on message number 444 on Senate File 100. You ready? I'll have it read in, please.
Message number 444, referencing Senate File 100, Designation of Spouses, Revocation upon Divorce or Annulment.
Senator Barlow.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, I would move message 444 to Senate File 100 and ask for your favorable consideration and aye vote on House amendments to the Senate File 100, Designation of Spouses, Revocation upon Divorce or Annulment. Mr. President, I'll just walk through the page very quickly. The first reading, standing committee amendment was a technical correction. Spouses is used throughout the rest of the bill in one section because it was drawn in from previous statute, it was husband and wife. So replacing that with spouses as it's used elsewhere. The second part is on page 6, and this is where if you remarry a former spouse, it would automatically give all those rights back. And what the good bringer of this amendment said, well, what if there's a prenuptial? So this actually deals with that potential of prenuptial. The third amendment has to do with, as you'll recall, with the bill, we added in a provision saying that a financial institution would not be held responsible if they did not have reasonable knowledge of the divorce or annulment. And so we added that, and what this says is that if they do pay to the wrong person, that person still has the right to try to collect the monies that should have otherwise gone to them. So, Mr. Chairman, I think these are all good changes. I do appreciate the work that was done at the other end, and I would ask for your aye vote on concurrence. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question being called. The motion is the Senate do concur on message 444 on Senate File 100 and vote aye. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Concurrence vote, Senate File 100. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen?
No.
No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 100, 24 aye, 7 no.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 100. Senator Hicks, are you ready on message number 447, requesting concurrence on Senate File 169?
Mr. President, I move message 447, concurrence requested on the original Senate File 169.
Could I have the reading clerk read it in, please?
Message number 447, concurrence requested referencing Senate File 169, State Shooting Complex Task Force.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, I move message number 447's concurrence requested on the original Senate File 169, State Shooting Complex Task Force, and would ask to vote aye. Basically, the substance of the changes that the House did is they removed the reference to the $5 million in ARPA fund. We found out that was not going to be eligible for ARPA direct funding or ARPA permissible funding, so they removed that. And then they just brought in language that said that we could accept any donations or gifts towards the state shooting complex. Mr. President, ask for an aye vote.
Question being called. Motion is that Senate do concur on Senate File 169, message 447, and vote aye. The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
Senate File 169, concurrence vote. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Garou? Aye. Hicks?
Aye.
Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? Aye. Jones? Aye. Kinski?
Aye.
Aye. Cole? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? Aye. McEwen? Aye. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? Aye. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 169, 29 aye, 2 no.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 169. Senator Dockstader, are you ready on message 445 on Senate File 116?
Yes, Mr. President.
I will have it read in, please.
Message number 445, referencing Senate File 116, protection of lawful commerce in firearms.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move message number 445, Senate File 116. Made a few adjustments on the other side of the building regarding when it takes place. It takes place immediately upon passage, a word correction, and making sure that we include some gunsmithing language in there, all friendly, and ask for your favorable vote.
Question being called. The motion is Senate do concur on Senate File 116, message 445, and vote aye. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Concurrence vote, Senate File 116, Anderson? Aye. Aye, Baldwin? Aye, Barlow? Aye, Beitman? Aye, Boner? Aye, Bouchard? Aye, Brennan? Aye, Case? Aye, Cooper? Aye, Dockstetter? Aye, Ellis? Aye, French? Aye, Furphy? Aye, Guru? Aye, Hicks? Aye, Hutchings? Aye, Ide? Aye, Jones? Aye, Kinski? Aye, Cole? Aye, Landon? Aye, Larson? Aye, McEwen? Aye, Nethercott? Aye, Pappas? Aye, Rothfuss? No. Salazar? Aye, Schuler? Aye, Scott? Aye, Steinmetz? Aye, President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 116, 30 aye, 1 no.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 116. We have one more concurrence there. Senator Hicks, are you ready on message 423 on Senate File 97?
Yes, Mr. President, could I have that read in?
Thank you.
Message number 423, referencing Senate File 97, Education Trust Fund Transfer.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move message number 423 to the original Senate File 97 Education Trust Fund and would request that you vote aye on concurrence. Members of the Senate, if you'll remember, this was an archaic trust fund that was set up. It had $5 million in it. Senate File 97 moved all of that money into the school foundation program, but it eliminated those grant programs for innovative grant programs for school districts. So what the House did in 2 different amendments ended up allocating $250,000 out of the school foundation program back to that innovative grant program for schools. Mr. Chairman, I think my original intent was always just to clean that account up and get a higher rate of return. So I would ask for concurrence on message 423.
Motion is the Senate do concur on Senate File 97 and vote aye. Chief Clerk will please call the roll.
Senate File 97, concurrence vote. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? Aye. Beitman? Aye. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? Aye. Brennan? Aye. Case? Aye. Cooper? Aye. Dockstetter? Aye. Ellis? Aye. French? Aye. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks.
Aye.
Aye. Hutchings. Aye. Ide. Aye. Jones. Aye. Kinsky. Aye. Kolb. Aye. Landon. Aye. Larson. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Aye. Scott. Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. President Driscoll.
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. Senate File 9731 aye.
By your vote, you have concurred on Senate File 97. Joint Conference Committee reports. Okay, we're going to appoint Joint Conference Committee number 2 to House Bill 14, Civil Case Filing Fees Amendments, Case Chair Kolb and Nethercott. Committee reports.
February 24, 2023. Mr. President, your Committee Number 2 Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 222 engrossed, Colorado River Advisory Committee, respectfully report same back to the Senate with the recommendation that it do pass amended. Ayes Senators Anderson, Guru, Kinsky, and Salazar. Excused Senator Nethercott. Senator Kinsky, Chairman.
Thank you. Bills on second reading. Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We weren't sure where this bill was on Friday, whether it had left our chambers. It's still here. So with that, Mr. President, I ask for immediate reconsideration of House Bill 123, collection of antler or horns by residents and non-residents. Ask for your favorable vote on reconsideration.
Thank you. So the bill was in the chamber. You will be voting for reconsideration first, and then we'll reconsideration first, and then we'll vote on the bill again. So the chief clerk will call the roll on reconsideration.
For reconsideration, Anderson. Aye. Baldwin.
Aye.
Aye. Barlow. Aye. Beitman. No. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. No. Brennan. No. Case. Aye. Cooper. Aye. Docksteder.
Aye.
Aye. Ellis. No. French. No. Furphy. Aye. Guru. No. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. No. Ide. No. Jones. Aye. Kinsky. Aye. Kolb. Aye. Landon. Aye. Larson. No. McEwen. No. Nethercott. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. No. Schuler. Aye. Scott. Aye. Steinmetz. No. President Driscoll.
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. For reconsideration, of House Bill 123, 19 aye, 12 no.
By your vote, House Bill 123 has passed reconsideration. We will now vote on House Bill 123. Chief Clerk will call the roll.
House Bill 123, third reading roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin?
Aye.
Aye. Barlow? Aye. Whitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? No. Dockstetter?
Aye.
Aye. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? No. Guru? No. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? No. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? No. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Landon, no to aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 123, 16 aye, 15 no.
Having received an affirmative vote of a majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 123 has passed the Senate. Bills on second reading. House Bill 74, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 74 engrossed, Wyoming Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund, an act relating to state lands.
Senator Case, there is an amendment. We have it read in.
House Bill 74, second reading amendments number 1 to engrossed copy, page 8, line 5, after.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, or Mr. President. I would move second reading amendment to House Bill 74. Mr. President, this is our recreation trust fund that we're creating, and I'm having a little bit of difficulty with this because I've experienced the process that this agency has used, and I've tried to bring it to the attention of the folks in this chamber and to our interim committees without luck. And the fact is their process isn't very good, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like them to adopt a better process. That's why I have brought this amendment. Mr. President, it's kind of an unparalleled time for recreation and tourism in Wyoming. It's a great industry, but it's not without issues with regard to damaging of resources, and it has a workforce, Mr. President, that is not highly paid, and we have kind of this, we have a churning where we have, a few years ago, we began to let this agency keep the fees that they collect, and then they allowed them to keep more of the fees that they collect, and then we've augmented with a tourism tax, Mr. President, that is now also overflowing in coffers. And so there's lots of money available for projects, but this agency has responsibility for lots of landscape with different purposes. Some, like Sinks Canyon, had a original charter about it being a historical natural history-based park. We have historical sites that are very, very important. We added to the list of significant historical places that are going to be under this agency's purview with the Red Ochre mining site that we did earlier this year. You know, but this agency also takes care of a lot of marinas and commercial development, and I don't know how we should classify Hot Springs Park. Chief Washakie gave it with some thinking in mind, and it is a very commercial enterprise now. What I've found is that, and if you take the case of Sings Canyon, Mr. President, the agency doesn't own much of Sings Canyon. It's mostly owned by the Wyoming Game and Fish, and it's mostly designated as critical winter range for our wildlife. And so when proposals come forth to have development and more activity and at different seasons in the year and more things, folks around my neck of woods in my area get concerned. We also get concerned, and also in my district is the South Pass State's historic site. So, Mr. President, this says, hey, let's have a process that is respectful, because I have been through the process that was proposed. And what happens is that this agency funds local boards that are advisory boards, but they tend to be made up of advocates for more infrastructure and more recreation. I'd like to see some more holistic thinking. That's the purpose of this, that we require that they make sure to balance and avoid negatively impacting historical uses, maintaining cultural integrity, and protecting wildlife habitat. And that, Mr. Chairman, we insert a new F. In fulfilling its duties under this act, the Commission shall develop a formal process following the APA that's respectful of some of these concerns. They need to consider the impact of increased outdoor recreation on natural resources and prioritize the protection of cultural and historical concerns and wildlife habitat. Preserve the charter designations of locations with historical or natural history characteristics, and consider mitigation of crowding, avoidance of competition with private industry, and support for maintaining the resources in a natural state. Happy to answer any questions. That's my proposed amendment.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against the amendment. I certainly understand the controversy that the senator has alluded to, and you know, that was not a fun issue to work on or to watch on the periphery or hear about as I traveled throughout the state during that summer. But what has me concerned about this particular amendment is on the federal level, there's a similar national law which requires it's a look before you leap statute. And it was passed in the 1970s, and I think with good intention. But in my particular area in the practice of law, I've seen this act being used multiple times in efforts to stop any kind of development, from grazing and oil and gas development, which are critical to Wyoming. And that at the federal level is a procedural statute. Here, my greatest concern is, you know, starting on line 17 and beyond, this, you know, the first Romanette talks about a process, but then the rest of it talks about the outcome and how we're supposed to do that priority. And so I do worry that this is coming, you know, in the form of a second reading amendment, understand the bringer's intent. But that's my concern, Mr. Chairman, is some of perhaps the unintended consequences that might result from not only telling our agency to look before it leaps, but telling them how to do it. So would urge you to resist this amendment at this time.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, on and for this amendment, we've seen problems at the state park in our area. Frankly, they were starting down the road to just turning it into a big commercial campground in competition with existing ones that was going to really wreck the state park. They scaled the plans back to the point where those of us who were concerned about the park felt, well, they weren't going to change the feature of it anymore. But the general fund was in real danger because it didn't make any economic sense what they were trying to do. I think we need to get this agency reined in. It's not being as well managed as it might be, Mr. President. And I think this amendment is a good step in the right direction.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a question regarding on the Romanet 1, the implications of the phrase pursuant to the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act. as opposed to leaving out that particular clause and just having the rest of the paragraph. The degree of formality there leads me to wonder if it creates an overly onerous process. Mr. President, I support the concept of this, and I think it's important to consider all of these parameters as projects are weighed and grants are weighed. Certainly the project that I spent 3 years working on in my neck of the woods contemplated all of these, and I think it was essential that that be done. So I support the idea, but thinking back through my experience on our project, the idea of us having to adhere to the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act, and I'm not entirely sure we would or would not, seems like it's adding another layer of bureaucracy that would discourage participation and the required volunteerism that's necessary for these types of projects to succeed. So perhaps more discussion on what the implications of specifically referencing the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act in this would be.
Senator Hicks.
Yeah, Mr. President, I share some of the concerns that are highlighted in here. I know just as a conversation piece that I know that the state to the south of us and their Division of Wildlife down there has basically said, Wyoming, get ready. Outdoor recreation has come. You better be prepared for the impacts associated. They're seeing significant negative impacts to bighorn sheep and mountain goat populations down there on a lot of these federal lands. And keep in mind, folks, this is broader than just your state parks. These are grants that could go out to local entities that don't have the wherewithal, have not consulted with other agencies as to the impact of these. So I really do share the concern of my colleague. We can love things to death. And Mr. Chairman, I think this is good sideboards. Quite frankly, I think we need a little more sideboards, and we need to go back and redo this provisions and the whole governance section associated with this. These were tourism recreation account dollars. It's broader than just outdoor recreation. These were tourism reserve account dollars. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm on and for the amendment, but I'm on and for further in this discussion as we move forward.
Other discussion. Senator Nethercott.
Thank you, Mr. President. On and for the amendment. And the reference to the Administrative Procedures Act, I think is appropriate. When I read that language there, to me, it's consistent with the rulemaking process. And so we either adopt the language as found in 16.3.104, essentially, and place it in the statutory section, or we can just reference the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act. That's the purpose, because it provides the direction that, at a minimum, require notice and public comment. So that's the piece. I do want to hear from the sponsor of the amendment about what that looks like, if this is the process for granting awards, and then do you expect a contested case proceeding to go along with that, or is this just the rulemaking process and a public forum? So maybe it is necessary to do some clarifying on the amendment, but generally speaking, I don't see that.
Further discussion. Senator Case, for your second time.
Mr. President, I went through this process in Fremont County, and I've had it thrown back in my face often saying it's just about one particular proposal. It's just about one idea, and it got people all hot and bothered. It's not. It's a systemic look at the process that we use to develop our public lands that are under the jurisdiction of this agency. Mr. President, they have a complicated mission with all these different hodgepodge of parks with different purposes and commercial enterprises. But right now, there is so much money available between the fees. Remember, we originally only gave them part of the fees, then we gave them more of the fees, and then we put in the tourism tax, which are now providing more money than we ever dreamed, I think, maybe. And it's often used for promotion and development. And I'm just saying, what makes Wyoming so special is all the parts that we hold dear. And I've seen bills, we just had one, Mr. President, where we decided that people in Wyoming deserve to be treated better than people that visit Wyoming. We heard it about antlers. And so I'm thinking people in Wyoming deserve a process, because commercial enterprises are looking to develop things on our state properties, lots of things. And the one reason they want to do it on our properties is they don't have to do the federal NEPA Act, which happens on federal lands. And believe me, I don't want to go there either. I do not want to create a mini system in Wyoming, but we need a little bit more structure to this. Just giving a bunch of money in a pot and saying the board can do anything they want with any process, oh my. With regard to this, would this be appealable? I wouldn't want to go there. I would like to limit it maybe on a subsequent reading to just that they follow a process where the public's included, there's notice, we make sure that it's robust, and it's not the echo chamber they've been using now with their local advisory boards, and a process where they collect testimony, but what comes out in the master plans is nothing like what was the people testified to. They need more structure. Thank you for supporting the amendment.
Voting on second read amendment number 1 to House Bill 74. Does not involve money. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 74 is passed the Senate. We have another amendment. Can we have it read in, please?
House Bill 74, second reading amendment number 2 to engrossed copy, page 1 above line 1 in.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, I move second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 74 when asked for your favorable consideration. So, Mr. President, what the amendment does, it's mostly removes much of the provisions in the bill. We just had the discussion on the governance side of it and some of the concerns associated with the governor. So what the effect of the amendment is, I'll just tell you, it leaves the formation of the trust account in the bill. It allows the continual transfer of those tourism reserve dollars to go into the trust account. So the account stays there, the funds flow into the account. Mr. Chairman, the only other thing that is left in the bill is it changes the name from the Outdoor Recreation Trust Fund to the Outdoor and Tourism Recreation, or the Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Trust Fund. And the reason that that's in there, Mr. President, you have to remember these are reserve account dollars from the tourism reserve account. They weren't, when the two bodies voted and we developed this, that was for the tourism account. Outdoor recreation is a subset of that. So I think it's very important that we continue the intent of the legislature was tourism, and if we want to do this, it's tourism and outdoor recreation. So the rest of the bill, Mr. Chairman, so that's what the amendment will do. It'll leave the formation of the corpus of the Wyoming Trust, Wyoming Outdoor and Tourism Trust Account. That's what the amendment will do. It allows for the flow of money to come out of the reserve account into this account. Mr. Chairman, the genesis of this, a lot of it was based on the discussion of the governance of the current situation right now. I don't think we got it right, Mr. President. I think we can come back and do better. We have numerous examples of how these trust accounts work very well in these type of programs. I would reference the Wyoming Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund. Got a tremendously good governance structure there, oversight board, a select committee that comes back to a standing committee. They review those processes. I think there's better governance structures, similar to the water development program. You have a board makes a recommendation to a committee that goes to a standing committee that comes to the legislature, and they have an omnibus bill. So I've got some real concerns with just the governance structure. The other side of this, Mr. Chairman, is we're not meeting the full potential if we're going to establish another trust fund. And we've had a lot of debate on what we do with our permanent mineral trust fund, our common school permanent land fund, our Hathaway account. We now have a template to generate higher rate of returns. Again, if we look at other models out there like the Wyoming Wildlife Natural Resource Trust Fund, there's no challenge account for here. There's no spending policy. There's no ability to inflation-proof the corpus of this. So for that purposes, Mr. Chairman, this would leave the account in place, lets it move forward, allows the money to flow, but is in the interim. And we've already discussed, I think my colleague from Teton County, that's been proposed. So if Management Council grants it, we'll come back and we'll put a little more meat on the structure of both the investment side and how we can best utilize those funds if we're going to put them into a permanent trust fund, and then also come back and really work this governance side that my colleague from Fremont County. So that's the effect of the amendment. I would ask for your favorable consideration. Would stand to answer any questions.
Under discussion, Senator Drew.
Thank you, Mr. President. On Friday, I asked the body to vote this on first reading and that we would come back with an amendment and make some changes. These are the changes that we've come back with. And while I would never say that our Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee during its interim work got anything wrong, but I think after talking with some people that have a little more experience in such things, I think we were a little short on getting it exactly right. And so what this amendment does is basically says we're going to appropriate this money, as the good majority floor leader said. And then we're going back to the folks at Capital Finance and Investment and work out a template on governance on it that looks a lot like other things that we're more familiar with, other forms, as he pointed out, and then go back to TRW and put the language in that addresses a lot of the other concerns, some of them that you just heard in a previous amendment, and that are actually still centered in this bill. And so instead of passing this out in its current form and then amending the heck out of it next year, we're going to bring you back a template that will have the whole picture. And so this just sets up the account and gets it rolling. And this is a project that I think is good for tourism, that is good for the economy of our state. This, to me, is what economic development looks like. This is the thing that we talk about, Mr. President, in our campaigns when we go, we need to diversify our economy. But the bringer of the last amendment was exactly right. And as someone who lives and has lived with it for a long time, the good and the negative of tourism, that we can love things to death and we can get it wrong and we can have unintended consequences. And so this bill sets a template for the future to help provide good economic development, but with the opportunity for us to put together the sideboards, to put together some of the things that we've all learned, whether it be with governance, with regard to finances, and with regard to some of the negative impacts of tourism itself, to come up with something that can move this state forward. I ask for your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, as I read the amendment on page 10, line 12, they're going to come back. There's an appropriation in here, but with this amendment, they'd come back to us for further authorization before they could expend the appropriation. And Mr. President, I think that's a very wise provision. As I read it, it's just applying for this appropriation this year. And I wonder if it should be applied generally in the future, or if that's something we need to do, not this year, but after we've had a good hard look at it. So I have a concern about that the application isn't quite broad enough to catch future expenditures. Maybe it is. And second, I do see it removes the amendment we just passed. I wonder on third reading, if this passes, if it wouldn't be wise to bring back that previous amendment as well on third reading, so that that's available for conference committee, and that one of the things will wind up governing, Mr. President. So with those reservations, Mr. President, I think we ought to adopt this amendment. I think it's a major step in the right direction here.
Further discussion, Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I appreciate both of the previous speakers. They've touched on some very good points, and I'm willing to certainly go along to try to get this right. My question to the bringer of the amendment is why would we pull tourism back into this? One of the things that intrigued me, fellow senators, and that I liked about the work we did on the Travel, Recreation, and Wildlife Committee is to set up a fund that I thought was a little bit different, that had a chance to maybe be someday up in the neighborhood of the Wildlife Fund that we're all very familiar with. This idea of outdoor recreation is not necessarily tourism. I kind of share the concern of the senator from Fremont County when he says, you know, there's some negatives that come along with this. And so I guess maybe a little more discussion about why would we take funds out of this tourism reserve and put them over for a specific purpose, but then pull tourism back into it. That's the piece I'm really struggling to get there, Mr. President. It seems like maybe we would want this to be something a little different. You know, there's over 200 different monuments out across our state that this agency takes care of. Over 200. I had no idea. You know, those little concrete bases that have these little pillars up in the middle of nowhere that somebody's got to go check on and take care of. I'm just intrigued by the notion of an outdoor recreation fund that could be used to help mitigate some of what potentially is coming from the south and elsewhere. So maybe a little more on that one. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion. Senator Rothfuss and then Senator Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, for the reasons just discussed, I'd like to divide the amendment and separate the two questions, one about the governance and the other about changing it to recreation or recreation and tourism. I think they're separate questions, and I can get behind the governance. I don't know that I can get behind the change, and I want a separate discussion on it to understand more about it. With that being said, I'd ask that this be divided in accordance with the following. Lines 1 through 4 will be a part of Division 1. The page 1, line 2 of line 4 will go with both divisions. It's an important little bit. In addition, Division 1 will include lines 15 through 18, 24 and 25, 30 and 31, 34 and 35, and on page 2, line 6, where the words page 10, line 8 will go with both divisions. So two clear separate questions, Mr. President. Division 1 is just the concept of changing the purpose from outdoor recreation to outdoor recreation and tourism. Division 2, the rest of the bill, deals entirely with the delay in governance structure, Mr. President.
Divisible. Discussion on
Divisible?
Division 1. It
All good?
is.
Okay. On Division 1, Mr. President, I do want to hear more about this because the magnitude of tourism and the purpose of tourism is different from the magnitude of outdoor recreation at this point in time and the purpose of it. With two very separate purposes, I see challenges where you effectively have conflict on the board of trying to decide which direction to apply the funds and what programs to apply the funds to. We have a board of tourism, an excellent board of tourism that does a spectacular job, and I think if anything, you know, I'd like to see that expand. I think we're doing a great job of getting additional resources to it, and they're definitely meeting the interests of the state in expanding tourism. What attracted me to this legislation was the fact that we really don't have strong development of a program for outdoor recreation. Again, speaking from the experience I had at the Pilot Hill project for 3 years, I would have liked a more specific utility-based organization with a mission of outdoor recreation to engage with. And this, to me, Mr. President, meets that specific interest, and I wouldn't want its focus split with tourism. But again, I'm open to hearing more. Maybe I'm missing something.
Further discussion, Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, on Division 1 for my first time and the discussion, so if these were general fund dollars, I would concur with my colleague that we don't need to call out tourism. But keep in mind, when we passed this legislation, it was specific for a tourism reserve account. That's what that money was for. That was the original intent. That's what the legislature passed out of here. So, Mr. Chairman, I think it almost goes beyond by just taking this money out of the tourism reserve account for which these bodies voted for and just shifting it over to another purpose without any connection or any cross-pollination between those two. I don't, Mr. Chairman, I think that violates what we originally did with the tourism reserve account. Clearly, the legislature can do that. But outdoor recreation is one component of tourism. And I think to strengthen this, you need that cross-pollination because you may do the outdoor recreation, but if we're truly going to derive the economic benefit from that, then you also have to have tourism involved in doing the advertising and the recruitment and all of those campaigns to do that. So the way I look at this, it doesn't preclude, if we do this, funding some outdoor recreation, but it keeps that tourism nexus in there. This was designed to increase tourism and provide tourism with the state of Wyoming. I don't think you can bifurcate these and say one does this, one does that. And so that's the rationale by keeping that in there. I think as we get to the governance structure, you will probably still see some significant emphasis on outdoor recreation. But we also want to bring in that component for the economic development side of outdoor recreation with the Department of Tourism, with the Board of Tourism. That's a good marriage, Mr. Chairman. That's what we voted for when we voted for this. So I just think taking money out of that account now and doing it for specific uses is not consistent with what we passed that legislation to begin with. But again, it's more important to maximize both with this trust fund.
Discussion, Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I agree with all of what was just said, but in addition, when you look at what actually goes on the ground, go to, say, Guernsey State Park any weekend in the summertime, and you will see a lot of out-of-state license plates, Nebraska, Colorado, and whatnot. We're attracting a fair number of tourists there. And even in our little state park, Edna Kimball Wilkins Park in Casper, when I go out there, and I do a fair amount, I often run into somebody who is coming through, stopping through. They see there's a state park. They want to go out and walk in it and get some outdoor recreation, get outdoors, quit traveling for a bit, and it does add to the tourist attraction all over the state, having these state parks. So, Mr. President, I think that tourism is an inescapable part of having the kind of outdoor recreation that most of our state parks provide. So I think it's very appropriate to have them as the bill does provide.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had a meeting last week with a number of stakeholders involved in this legislation. And when this was first brought up by our good majority floor leader, I thought real hard and long about it. And I wasn't sure at first if that marriage really needed to happen. But then the more I thought about it, it made a lot of sense. Because these funds are coming from the tourism account, reserve account. And honestly, the tourism director was with us, as well as State Trails and other folks, other stakeholders that were there when the meeting. And honestly, really, the more I thought about it, it makes a lot of sense. They are interrelated. My only concern would be making sure that the governance is different from this reserve account fund versus the tourism board. And I think these projects that might come forth from our recreation people, those do need to be vetted by a different board, and maybe with the same kinds of parameters as we said before, as the Wildlife Trust Fund. But I do think this amendment with the tourism added into that outdoor rec, I think makes sense to me. So on and for the amendment.
Here's another cot.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I have been kind of struggling with the bill and ties to the amendment, which is what hesitancy over creating another trust fund, and then what does this particular fund do? And then, and I have to be candid, and I am on the amendment, but I don't know that it's fully clear yet, and our debate demonstrates that. One of the concerns I know that I think all of us share is that our parks, our state parks, certainly need investment, and the state benefits from the tourists who come to visit our state parks. But we all are concerned about them being loved a little too much and recognize those concerns right now. And so I was excited about the fund maybe in two ways. One, to continue to develop, I would say, infrastructure associated with the development of outdoor recreation and support for those parks to protect them from being overloved, which of course is a direct result from tourism, which we want to continue as well. And so striking that balance, I do think they are connected together. They must be connected together, that tourism needs to fund those parks, which attract our tourists. And I think it's an appropriate use of funding for them. And so I do support that. But I would like to see a little more discussion long-term or the next steps so that there's consensus among the body, because what I think may happen next year and in the next couple of years, well, that's not what this is for, that's not how that's intended, and the program isn't being utilized in the way that any of us wanted. And so there does need to be a better plan, I think, for how this is going to come to fruition and how it's going to be effectuated, because I think everyone has in their minds how they envision it, which may not be what occurs. And so everyone is a loser at that point. So I'm on and for the amendment in total and for the division. So I do think they need to be connected on that front, but I would like more conversation about how we strike this balance of overutilizing our state assets that can't be recovered from.
Senator Drew.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too am in favor of including tourism in this, and precisely for some of the reasons that were discussed. This doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it won't. It's just like any other development we do with oil and gas or anything else, that you have to take into consideration the environmental picture that comes and the questions that come from it, and also the benefits of tourism. It also has to talk about business. And as my good friend from Bates Creek was talking about, what we don't want to do is we don't want to step on the toes of private business, but we also want to work with private business, and whether it be with tourism or with the business council or whoever, to try to help nurture them and then work together in a more symbiotic relationship. So it's not that it's just one agency going out and putting a park or putting more campsites somewhere just in this vacuum, that it's actually working together with tourism, working together with whether it be workforce services or the private sector in trying to build, and take input from them. What do you need? What do you see that is necessary to help your business? Say you own a repair shop for bicycles and you're building trailheads and stuff. It's like, well, okay, does this help your business? Is this something that can do? And that's where I see this working together. And I think by broadening this just a bit, it pulls that in and tries to anticipate the unintended consequence and tries to help nurture that. So that's why I think that on this amendment, I think that we should include these two together.
Senator Landon. Senator Rosses.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I regrettably remain concerned, and here are the reasons for that. The idea that all outdoor recreation is for tourism, or that the two are instrumentally linked, does not strike me as accurate. There's no question that we gain a tremendous amount of tourism from our outdoor recreation, but it was the value of this legislation was the idea that we had something that was uniquely focused on outdoor recreation, which didn't have to necessarily be for tourism. Outdoor recreation is a great way to build community. And sometimes that outdoor recreation is really for the local community, not to bring people in from out of state. We all know that we'd like better trail systems. We'd like better bike paths. We'd like a lot for our communities that isn't necessarily going to get someone to pack up their camper and drive north to engage in outdoor recreation. But, Mr. President, what I'm hearing is that since these are travel and tourism dollars, that we need to shift the fund over towards travel and tourism to acknowledge that, which makes some sense. But I guess what I would say is we started off with general fund dollars. The original piece of legislation was general fund dollars for the purpose of outdoor recreation. So then we decided, well, we don't want general fund dollars. We want travel and tourism dollars because those are available. Let's pull it over. And then we wagged the dog a little bit and said, well, if they're travel and tourism dollars, then darn it, this should be a tourism fund. Well, we're kind of losing sight of the outdoor recreation as I see it, and the value of the entire bill, House Bill 74, is diminishing with each passing amendment, in my view, where we're no longer focused on outdoor recreation as the primary point. We're thinking about it from a tourism standpoint. We really don't have a shortage of folks working on tourism at this point in time. So if the real concern is that we shouldn't be using travel and tourism dollars for an outdoor recreation program, I think that's fine, that's fair. We could probably shift and go back on a later amendment and take the money from the general fund where it was coming from in the first place, Mr. President. I'd rather have a pure outdoor recreation fund available whether you're helping tourism or not, even though we all know that it's an important part of our tourism economy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question being called. Senator Rothfuss, I'm going to read this back, and I think I've short one piece. So we are voting on Division 1. She's spoken twice,
Okay.
so. Senator Hicks.
For my second time on
Can't.
Division 1.
Sponsors. You are not, okay, very good. Correct. So we'll go to Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Briefly, I think we're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. There was a concern that maybe outdoor rec was a little too narrow. We're trying to broaden it by having the discussion about whether or not tourism dollars should be, or tourism should be included in this. But there are other safeguards in the bill that are still relevant and still there, including an annual report to the governor, the Joint Appropriations Committee, and the Joint TRW Committee. So as this thing evolves, we'll continue to look at the kind of projects that are being supported with these dollars. And then just another reminder, this requires matching funds and that the cap amount for each project would be $250,000. So I think we've got some guardrails in there that we can take a look at this down the road. And if this language needs to be tightened up in future sessions to really solely focus on outdoor rec, if we don't think it's achieving its purpose, we can do that. But I vote for this division of this amendment. Let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, for my second time, and I would ask that you vote aye for Division 1. This doesn't prejudice by any way that says that you couldn't fund those local outdoor projects. It doesn't do that, Mr. President. So what we anticipate is that this will come through a fairly rigorous process. But it doesn't say you can't, doesn't say we won't consider it, just says on these recreation projects, we are now going to consider the impacts of tourism. And it may well come out that there's a recommendation back through the commission, to the board, to the select committee, to the standing committee, to the legislature, that these particular projects for local recreation are important enough, and there's enough match, no impacts, that they could go ahead and award those funds. But on other projects, Mr. Chairman, we may want to really highlight these. I think my colleague from Natrona County, what about all these monuments around the state of Wyoming? Would we not want tourism to be involved in advertising those type of facilities? So it doesn't say you can't. It just says we're going to go back and we're going to redevelop the criteria to make sure all of these concerns are addressed. bring back a governance scene. So it, no way does it preclude that you couldn't do that. It just says there's going to be a process. Part of that process may be very well that we set a portion of money aside for local projects. Other ones are high visibility, high dual outdoor recreation and tourism projects where those communities really want to bring people in there to spend money in their community. So in no way does this prejudice, I think, what my colleague from Albany County is trying to get to. So I would ask for an aye vote on Division 1 and Division 2, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to read the amendment. I think I've missed one piece. Senator Rothfuss went through. Division 1, page 1, lines 1 to 3, line 4 in both divisions, lines 15 to line 18, line 24 to 25, line 30 to 31, line 34 to 35, page 2, line 6, both. Does that cover it, Senator Rothfuss? Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very close. On the two lines that are in both, it's the fact that the line is split. So on line 4, page 1, after recreation, insert and tourism would go with the first division. The rest would go with the second division. So you need the words page 1, line 2 in both. And similarly, on line 6, page 2, you'd have a split so that the line number's there, but otherwise the rest is accurate.
Very
Thank you,
good.
Mr. President.
So we're voting on Division 1 on second reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 74. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Division 1 is passed. We're on Division 2. Senator Rothfuss.
Nope.
Nope. Question being called on Division 2. Division 2 will be page 1, lines 4 to 14, lines 19 to 23, lines 26 to 29, lines 32 and 33, lines 36 to 44, and page 2 in the entirety. Are there any questions? Seeing none. All in favor of Division 2 say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Division 2 to House Bill 74 has passed the Senate. That leaves second read amendment number 2 to House Bill 74 has passed in its entirety. We're back on the bill. House Bill 74 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 89, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 89 engrossed. State investment returns adequate reserve funding.
House Bill 89 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 208, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 208, School Foundation Program Reserve Account Investments.
Senator Scott, there is an amendment. Can we have it read in?
Mr. President.
Senator Scott.
Mr. President, I'm working on an amendment on this. I ask it be laid back one day.
Without objection, it is so ordered. House Bill 209, second reading of the House bill.
House Bill 209, Hathaway Scholarship Accounts Transfer Timing.
House Bill 209 having been read 2 separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Bills on third reading. There is no consent list. House Bill 11, third reading of the House bill.
House Bill 11, State Park Rangers Retirement, an act relating to retirement sponsored by the Judiciary Committee.
Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall House Bill 11, State Park Rangers Retirement, pass the Senate? Chief Clerk will call the roll.
House Bill 11, third reading roll call. Anderson. Aye. Baldwin. Aye. Barlow. Aye. Beitman. Aye. Boner. Aye. Bouchard. No. Brennan. Aye. Case. No. Cooper. Aye. Dockstader. Aye. Ellis. Aye. French. Aye. Furphy. Aye. Baru. Aye. Hicks. Aye. Hutchings. Ide. Aye. Jones. Aye. Kinski. Aye. Kolb. Aye. Landon. Aye. Larson. Aye. McEwen. Aye. Nethercott. Aye. Pappas. Aye. Rothfuss. Aye. Salazar. Aye. Schuler. Aye. Scott.
Aye.
Aye. Steinmetz. Aye. Hutchings. Aye. President Driscoll.
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 11, 29 aye, 2 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elected to the Senate, House Bill 11, State Park Rangers Retirement, has passed the Senate. House Bill 17, third reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 17 engrossed, State Lands Grazing of Non-Owned Livestock, sponsored by the Agriculture Committee, an act related to state lands.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Absent objection, I ask that House Bill 17 be laid back for one day.
That objection is so ordered. House Bill 185, third reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 185 engrossed, Local Government Distributions Revisions, sponsored by the Appropriations Committee, an act relating to local government funding.
Senator Hicks.
Mr. President, absent any objections, I would ask that House Bill 185, local government distribution revisions, be laid back for one day.
Thank you. Without objection, so ordered. This is your last chance on the last bill, folks. House Bill 200, last reading of the House Bill.
House Bill 200, Non-Resident Hunting Licenses Application Fees, sponsored by Representative Northrup, an act relating to game and fish.
Having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall House Bill 200, non-resident hunting licenses, application fees, pass the Senate? The Chief Clerk will call the roll.
House Bill 200, third reading, roll call. Anderson? Aye. Baldwin? Aye. Barlow? No. Beitman? No. Boner? Aye. Bouchard? No. Brennan? No. Case? No. Cooper? Aye. Dockstader? Aye. Ellis? No. French? No. Furphy? Aye. Guru? Aye. Hicks? Aye. Hutchings? No. Ide? No. Jones? Aye. Kinski? Aye. Kolb? Aye. Landon? Aye. Larson? No. McEwen? No. Nethercott? Aye. Pappas? Aye. Rothfuss? Aye. Salazar? No. Schuler? Aye. Scott? Aye. Steinmetz? Aye. President Driscoll?
Aye.
Aye. Closing vote. Closing. Vote closed. House Bill 200, 19 aye, 12 no.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the Senate, House Bill 200, non-resident hunting licenses, application fees, has passed the Senate. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, we're at that order of business.
Mr. President, I move the Senate stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Are there any announcements? Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Joint Transportation, Highways, Military Affairs Committee will meet at 12:30 in room W6 and online to discuss interim topics. We will also hear a brief update about the Wyoming Cowboy Challenge Academy.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, will meet today at 1 o'clock in room W2 to consider interim topics.
Senator Case.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 7, Corporations, will conduct confirmation hearings at 12:30 in room W4. And there'll be confirmation hearings for Michael Robinson for the Public Service Commission and Anthony Ornelius for the Director of the Office of Consumer Advocate. It's a different room than we usually use.
Senator Kinski.
Thank you. Your committee number 2, Appropriations, will meet at 12:15 in room 311 for an informal conference to discuss a number of items such as joint topics. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your committee number 9, Minerals, will meet Tuesday, February 28th, 8 a.m., State Capitol Room W113, with our like and similar committee down the hall to discuss interim topics. Thank you.
Senator Schuler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Committee Number 6, Joint Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources, will meet tomorrow upon noon recess in Capitol Extension Room E05 to discuss interim topics. We'll also meet upon adjournment in a different room, W006, for a confirmation hearing of a governor appointee.
Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Joint Revenue Committee will meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. in W6, Capitol Extension Room, to discuss interim topics.
Their announcements, seeing none. Heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate will stand recessed till 2 p.m.